And finally, I'm able to actually sell all the Sony cameras that I owned, because officially I wanted to switch to Nikon and wanted to start using Nikon ZR as my primary camera as much as I can, or if not primary, as a guiding tool, or something which I want to be comfortable with using. But since I had a lot of Sony cameras beforehand, I initially sold my A7C II and ZV-E1 to actually fund the Nikon ZR. But then by just grabbing some deals on the marketplace, I ended up with a FX30 and a ZV-E10 Mark II. Now, don't get me wrong, those cameras, especially for the price, are just fantastic. But sometimes you just have to realize that the type of content and the journey, or I would say where you are in your journey as a content creator, you need to sometimes stop, visualize, contemplate, and see if all the gear that you have is actually what you need to create the kind of videos that you're creating. So in that case, that setup with all the Sony gear was falling short, because I find myself using my cameras more for photos as well as videos, whereas earlier I was not that much keen on exploring the photo side of things. And that's where Sony camera just leads. Like, if you want a one and done camera for video where you don't have to worry about how you're gonna use all the tools, the S-Log 3 workflow was quite decent and wasn't too cumbersome. It's easy to get around, and all those things, including the accessories, the app support, and all the rest that comes with the Sony ecosystem. They were fantastic options for video work, especially if you're just doing 4K videos, which, truth be told, even in 2026, for content creation, YouTube, TikTok, Insta, whatever, 4K is way more than enough. But saying that, that's where my deviation from Sony was heading towards cameras like Lumix, or recently Nikon started using color profiles or picture profiles, which allow them to get JPEG workflow on, which means you don't necessarily have to heavily color grade to get a final image, which is just fantastic. Like, Lumix does it via their lookup table or LUTs, and the Lumix cameras actually have option for, I believe, up to 39 different lookup tables or LUTs to be installed or uploaded to their cameras, which is just a lot of LUTs to go around. But in Nikon, we got 7 LUTs in this Nikon Z50 Mark II that I'm shooting on, and that allows me to take photos straight off the camera and just transfer over Wi-Fi to the phone and just use or share those photos straight away. And Sony doesn't do that, not effectively at least, and that's why I'm glad to get rid of all my Sony gear. But I'm not saying that I didn't want to sell the Nikon Z50 and keep the Sony. It's just that Sony on a marketplace is very easy to sell and buy compared to other gear. Like, I've had the Z50 Mark II on sale for a while, since I picked up my Nikon ZR actually, because I picked up this camera for photos, like light photos and some videos of when I'm traveling with family, because Nikon Z52 is the newer camera for Nikon APS-C sensor, and it does have 10-bit color, so it's decent video. Doesn't have IBIS, so it's not as good, but I was able to actually get a couple of lenses which had optical image stabilization, or in Nikon terms, vibration reduction, so that wasn't that much of an issue. But overall, I think I wasn't getting what I sort of wanted to get, especially when you consider that I just picked up the Nikon ZR, which would have all those access to those color profiles, and it's a full frame sensor, so I get decent photos out of that as well. But overall, if I have to just pick one camera for photos, I would, I think, rather pick the Lumix S5 2X that I have. And the reason for that is availability of those customization of LUTs, as well as the colors that the Lumix cameras produce are way nicer than Sony, of course, and they are comparable to Nikon. I still sometimes prefer the JPEGs that are coming from my Nikon, including the Z50 Mark II. And I'll actually share some photos which I took on a trip to Gold Coast, which was, and we actually went on a little cruise for whale watching as well. And I wasn't even using native glass then. I was using a Sigma 18-50 E-mount via an adapter. And even then I was able to get some decent photos out of this sensor and camera setup. And the best part, it's light, it's cheap enough that I can play around or even hand it over to someone and not worry about damaging it and things like that. And since I got my Nikon ZR, I picked up a Viltrox adapter, which actually bricked my Sigma 18-50, as well as a Viltrox 23mm 1.4 lens, which means it broke it. It just stopped working. And I assumed and concluded that it was because of the adapter. And when I was reading it online, I found a couple of posts on Reddit that similar thing happened to some other people. And that's why I just returned that adapter saying it's faulty. And since then, I thought I wouldn't buy an adapter, but I picked up a Neva adapter, which I was able to actually sell it with the Nikon ZR that I picked up after I bought my ZR to reduce the overall cost that I paid for my ZR. So there was a guy who was selling the Nikon ZR. I picked it up to offset the cost of my ZR, and the person I gave it to actually gave me a FX30, but he wanted the adapter because he obviously had Sony GM lenses which he wanted to try. I think he was a wedding filmographer or videographer, so in that case that worked out better for me. I got to try the FX30, which I really liked. Like, it was a camera which I didn't expect to like that much, but I liked it more than my FX ZV-E10 Mark II for sure. I wouldn't say I liked it more than ZV-E1 just because of the image coming out of ZV-E1 is way more better. Let's be real. It's a full frame sensor, 12 megapixel beast of a camera when it comes to low light. The only issue is overheating, and it doesn't overheat that much. And that's the camera which I might pick up if I get a decent deal on Marketplace later, just to have in my kit for using my Sony glass until that sells. So I've got a couple of Sony glasses which I still I'm trying to sell, including a 24 GM, a Sigma 18-50, and funny enough, I just picked up another Sony glass after I just sold my ZV-E10 Mark II. So I literally gave my ZV-E10 Mark II to the new buyer, and she didn't want any other glass with it. So I had a deal with someone else for a Sigma 16mm 1.4 lens prior to deciding that I want to sell my ZV-E10. But since I had that many conversations with him, it was only fair that I pick it up because I would be able to either way use it with my Nikon cameras. And it's a 1.4 glass, so that makes a setup like this very good. And it comes up with, like, if you look at the motion blur or the difference between me and my hand and face and the blur you get, 1.4 is always welcome on APS-C, because that way the picture looks closer to what a full frame look would you would get on a similar focal length. Like, for example, this is 16 1.4, which is equivalent to almost 24 full frame, equivalent to 1.8 or let's say 2.1 f-stop, but it still lets in 1.4 amount of light, which means it's great in darker scenarios. And for some reason, this lens seems to be working perfectly as far as the focus is concerned, because look at how quick it is. It might be because of the adapter that I picked up. So as I was saying, I was able to sell that Neva adapter with my Nikon ZR, and then I picked up a Megadep adapter, which have been quite popular recommendations when you're trying to use your Sony glass for your Nikon cameras. And that's why I'm not keen on picking up another Sony anytime soon, unless I get a deal where I know I would be able to either make some money out of it, or would be able to try something new, like the A7 IV maybe, but not anytime soon, not unless this channel starts to do and get me some revenue, even if it's like hundreds of dollars in a month. That doesn't matter, because once you get that ball rolling with the AdSense revenue and other things, it's easy to justify to yourself and to whosoever you need to justify to in your life that I'm doing it for a reason and these are the tools that I need. So yeah, in that case, I'm left with my Nikon cameras and my Lumix cameras, and I'm still getting my hopes high to sell my Lumix S9. I love that camera. It's fantastic for what it is, but I do have this camera which takes decent photos. It's light, so just for photo work, I think I prefer Z50 Mark II. So either of these camera sells, I'll be happy to keep the other one. So in that case, I'll have two cameras which you usually need, one for your A camera, one for shooting behind the scenes. And some people think that you can use things like your phone or maybe action camera for that, and I agree. It wouldn't be end of the world if I use such a thing on my behind the scenes or BTS shots, but I am someone who loves using cameras and trying out different lenses and ecosystems. So for me, I can justify keeping two cameras even though I'm not earning anything from my channel, at least not from this one. It's still fine. And those two cameras currently, if I have to choose between the cameras that I have, would be my S5 IIX from Lumix and my ZR, because S5 IIX does have EVF. It's good enough for photos. It's actually really good for photos, but I still prefer the Nikon's JPEG or color science for photos. But for videos, the reason I'm saying S5 IIX is one I want to keep is because of the stability that Lumix camera have is unparalleled. Like, it's really as close to an action camera as you can get on a big mirrorless camera. And ZR, of course, because it's a fantastic camera. It's something which I've anticipated that I wouldn't buy, but when I tried it and I was able to sell my cameras, as I said, the ZV-E1 and A7C II at profit for my E1. So it was not easy, but it was a decent enough decision that I was like, yeah, might as well just get rid of those two things which I know how they work and try to actually use the new system, the new kid on the block. And once I started using it, I realized that Nikon ZR is not just a good camera for professionals. I think it's a fantastic camera for someone like us who's a beginner. And that's why I even started to create videos in episodes where I'm trying to help out different creators at different skill level to actually understand and use the Nikon ZR as their primary camera. And it's a step-by-step process. So initially I started with episodes, like I'm on episode 3 right now, which would be coming in I think this week or early next week. But the series is about if you are planning to start your journey on any social media, but especially on YouTube, and if you want to pick up a Nikon ZR or any camera for the matter, but specifically for the ZR, because the settings I'll be talking about will be catered towards Nikon ZR. But the concepts that I'm talking about, you can obviously use it for other cameras as well. And that's where I think I'm focusing on right now, to providing value to anyone who's starting to delve into the YouTube world and camera world. And if they're confused, they are worried about the complicated structure that someone have to work towards, then the videos that I'm creating on the series would be really helpful to. Yeah, let's do F2. Yeah, that's much better. Maybe it's too dark. Yeah, I need to figure out where I'll be using this setup, but I think I needed something for my I wouldn't call it a studio, but the studio environment that I'm in. At home, my office desk. That's why I wanted a setup which is a replacement for my ZV-10 Mark II, which I had. Unfortunately, for a camera like this, I don't have a dummy battery. So either I'll see if I need a dummy battery that my sessions of recording are exceeding the battery capacities that my Nikon Z52 provides, then I'll probably just get a dummy battery for this camera. Because from the initial looks of it, the footage doesn't look bad at all. Like, it looks fantastic. But let's see how it translates to when I'm actually looking and editing it on the PC. Or obviously you guys can tell me as well, how do you like this footage, and is it good enough, or do you think there needs to be a change of any sort of, not from framing perspective, but the color science, the blur you're getting, and all the rest of the good stuff. And I'm using an ND filter, actually 3-in-1 ND filter CPL with black mist filter. So the highlights that are bloomed are because of that filter, which, if you're not aware what all that means, it means that you would be able to control how much light gets to your sensor. That's the variable ND. And the other thing is CPL, which means the reflection that you get on the glass or my glass and other things like that. And the last bit is the black mist filter, which is responsible for, if you look at my hand, it does have a softer glow because the sun rays are too harsh, and the black mist's job is to put some blemish or sort of a soft glow on those things. Although this is 1/4 strength, if you want this effect to be subtle, just go with a 1/8 strength filter and you'll be fine. It's just that this filter that I got doesn't come in 1/8. Otherwise, that's the look I prefer. And for VND, let me actually show you how it works. So just by twisting it, you can actually see the increasing or decreasing. And it's been a while since I'm recording this video, and the fact that I've got the temperature reading on my car to be 32 degrees and I've got no overheat warning on this camera might mean that the decision I took to sell the ZV-10 Mark II would have been a good one, because that overheated on me while I was shooting my last episode on my series 0 to 100 series, and I was just shooting indoors. Although I didn't have the fan on, but it wasn't that hot that day. But for this camera to not overheat in 32 degrees while shooting for that long of a video, I think, and that too, I'm charging this camera while I'm recording. So I think it should be fine for a setup like at home with the tripod and stuff. And as I said, the autofocus is really fast. It works as good as native, and that's something which I've improved on Z50 Mark II. Like, the autofocus changed, the 10-bit was introduced, USB-C was introduced, and the color profile. Like, there's literally a color profile button on top, which lets me choose different color profiles. The only thing is you can't do it on the fly while you're recording. You have to stop the recording, choose the color profile, and then start the recording. But then nonetheless, you can have a built-in look into your videos and your JPEGs, which just makes this camera fantastic value. It's just sad that, you know, you're not able to sell them as quickly as a brand like Sony or Fuji, because that way someone can try them a lot more easily, and, you know, we'll be able to see how amazing these cameras are. Otherwise, like, there's a lot of people selling Fuji and Sony gear, which you are easily able to try, and if it doesn't work out for you, you can sell them. And there's an art, I wouldn't say art, there's precautions that you need to take when you're actually doing marketplace shopping. Like, there's a lot of scammers around, there's a lot of frauds happening, so you need to be cautious about the stuff. But in my experience, like, if you're just starting out, maybe buy the camera body new, but try to source the lenses used, because unless someone dropped it and there's literally damage on the body of the lens or outside or inside the glass element, there's nothing that can go too wrong with the lenses. Like if you are able to see any damage, obviously don't buy that one. But if there's no damage, if you try it on your camera, just try to switch the aperture, see the focus by manually twisting the focus ring. If all that works, the chances are the lens would be good. And marketplace usually have the lenses on more discount than the camera bodies itself. And the camera body, you need that certainty that does not drop, or the sensor is fine and other things like that, or even have warranty on it. But the lenses, not so much. So yeah, that's my current status of my game, my journey, where I'm headed. I live in Australia, if you're wondering, and the temperature over here is usually fluctuating. But I'm in Queensland, which is tropical in climate, so usually it's hot. The winters are approaching. We move opposite to most part of the world, which is like we have in December, we have peak summer. In June, July, we have peak winter. And that's something which translates to me using the cameras differently, because overheating is a issue in this climate. But saying that, I'm glad that in Australia, at least the prices of the cameras are fairly reasonable. Like the Sony ZV-10 Mark II is currently on discount for 1,300 Australian dollars, which would translate to, I think, around 800 US dollars, around that. And for that price, it's fantastic camera. Same goes with this one. I bought it for 1,200 Australian, brand new. And for that price, this camera is just fantastic. And the photos and the videos you get out of that camera is like, this camera is so good that sometimes I wonder, why do I even need all the rest of the gear, like, including the ZR. But then again, I want to learn and grow into not cinematographer side of things, but more like a storyteller for my channel. And in that case, the camera is helping me a lot. And in the next video, I'll actually share my first real story where I was able to create an end-to-end story with my son. Although it's less than a minute, but it's still a memorable thing which I did, and even he remembers it. And he wasn't even 3 then. So that's something which the Nikon ZR did for me that any other camera did not, to inspire me to create something special. Not for others, not for you might not like it, but for me it's something which I'll cherish and remember my content creation journey by. So yeah, that's it for this video, and I'll share my story or my first actual creation in the next upcoming videos, along with the next episode 3 for 0 to 100 series. And to support the channel, subscribe to the channel, and I would love to get your feedback via comments. And if you want me to cover any topic or any particular thing, if you want to know about any experiences that I had with my cameras, with my gear, then feel free to reach out to me via comments also. I really appreciate the feedback, especially if it's constructive. Like if you just want to rant about things, then feel free to do that as well. But I'll appreciate if it's constructive feedback, or if it's something which you would like me to continue. But yeah, other than that, this is Amit. This was a Z50 Mark II on a 16mm 1.4 lens, currently shooting on f2. And we'll see you in the next one.